It was a quiet evening when Maya stopped at the small gas station on the edge of town. She had just finished a long day at her office job and wanted nothing more than to fill her tank, buy a bottle of water, and head home. The sky was turning orange, and the streetlights were slowly coming on. Everything felt normal, peaceful, and safe. Maya stepped out of her car, stretched her shoulders, and began fueling. She hummed softly to herself, thinking about dinner and her warm bed. She had no idea that the next few minutes would turn her night into a moment she would remember forever. As she stood by the pump, a police car suddenly pulled in behind her with its lights flashing. Maya froze, confused. She had not broken any rule. She was simply parked at a gas station like everyone else. She looked around, wondering if maybe the officer was here for someone else, but the car stopped right behind her vehicle. The officer stepped out quickly, walking toward her with firm step. His voice sounded sharp when he asked for her ID. Maya blinked in surprise. "Sir, I'm only getting fuel," she said in a calm tone. She tried to stay polite because she didn't want the situation to become tense. But the officer acted as if she had done something wrong. He asked her why she was there, where she was going, and why she was out at this hour. His tone made her uncomfortable. She felt embarrassed because a few people at nearby pumps were looking at her, whispering quietly. Maya kept her hands visible and her voice steady. "I'm heading home from work. I stopped for gas. That's all." But the officer didn't seem satisfied. He kept repeating questions that didn't make sense. Maya felt a heavy pressure in her chest. She had always tried to follow every rule, be respectful, and avoid trouble. Yet here she was, standing alone at a gas station, being treated as if she had done something unusual. For a moment, she wondered if she should call someone. But she didn't want to cause a scene. She told herself to stay patient, even though the situation felt unfair. The officer stepped closer, looking around her car as if searching for a reason to question her further. Maya held her breath. She didn't want to say anything wrong. She didn't want to show fear either. She just wanted to go home. People continued watching. Some pretended not to see, but Maya felt their eyes. It made her feel small and exposed, like she was being judged without anyone knowing her story. She kept thinking, "Why me? I haven't done anything." The officer's voice grew more strict. "You need to answer properly," he said, though she already was. Maya felt her palms grow warm. She wanted to cry but stopped herself. She knew staying calm was the only safe choice. Then something unexpected happened. A black SUV slowly pulled into the pump right beside Maya's car. The sound of its engine made the officer glance over. His face changed instantly. The expression of strict confidence disappeared. He straightened his back, swallowed hard, and took a small step away from Maya. His whole body language shifted, from controlling to nervous. Maya didn't understand why at first. She followed his gaze. Inside the SUV behind the wheel sat an older man with a serious but calm expression. Maya recognized him immediately. She had seen him on the news and at community events. He was the chief of police, and he had seen everything. The officer's hands shook slightly as he tried to adjust his vest. He greeted the chief in a shaky voice, stumbling over his words. But the chief didn't greet him back. He didn't even look at him at first. He was focused on Maya, on the way she was standing, the tension in her face, and the fear she was trying to hide. The chief stepped out of his SUV, closed the door quietly, and walked toward them with a steady pace. Every step felt like a wave of authority, not in a harsh way, but in a way that made the officer look even more uneasy. Maya felt her heartbeat slow just a little. She didn't know what would happen next, but she could already tell that someone important had witnessed the entire interaction. Someone who understood fairness and responsibility. The officer lifted his chin as if trying to appear professional, but his voice trembled when he finally said, "Chief, I was just..." But the chief raised a hand gently to silence him. Then he looked at Maya and asked in a calm, respectful tone, "Mom, are you okay?" That one question felt like a lifeline. The first moment that night where Maya felt seen, respected, and safe, and everything in the gas station suddenly became quiet, as if the entire world was watching what would happen next. The moment the chief asked Maya if she was okay, the entire mood of the gas station changed. The officer who had been questioning her stiffened, his confidence melting away. Even the people at nearby pumps stopped pretending not to watch. Everyone could feel that something important was about to happen. Maya took a slow breath before speaking. She didn't want to sound emotional, but her voice still trembled slightly. "I'm fine, sir, I just don't understand why he stopped me. I was only getting fuel." The chief nodded gently. His face showed concern, not anger. "Thank you for telling me," he said. He then turned his head toward the officer and looked at him with steady eyes. The kind of look that said he expected honesty. "Why did you stop her?" the chief asked. The officer opened his mouth, closed it, then tried again. "Chief, I was just doing a routine check." She looked, I thought. His words tangled together. He knew it didn't sound right. He knew the chief wasn't buying it. The chief frowned slightly but stayed calm. A routine check at a gas station. While she was simply buying fuel. His voice was firm but level, not loud, not harsh, just full of authority. Maya watched the exchange quietly. She didn't want to interrupt. She didn't want to do anything that might make things worse. But she felt something inside her slowly relaxing. Someone was finally listening. The chief turned back to her. "Ma'am, please tell me exactly what happened." Maya nodded. She explained the officer's sudden arrival, the flashing lights, the repeated questions, and the uncomfortable way he spoke to her. She kept her words simple, because she didn't want to exaggerate anything. She only wanted the truth heard. The chief listened carefully, his eyes never leaving her face. He didn't interrupt. He didn't look impatient. He simply listened, showing more respect in those few minutes than she had been shown the entire evening. When she finished, the chief thanked her softly. "I appreciate your calmness," he said. Not everyone could stay this composed. The officer shifted nervously. His hands were fidgeting. He tried again to explain himself. "Chief, I didn't mean anything wrong. I just thought maybe she needed checking because..." "Because what?" The chief asked gently, but with a firmness that made the question feel heavy. The officer swallowed hard. I wasn't sure," the officer admitted finally. The chief sighed, not in anger, but in disappointment. "The kind a teacher has when a student knows better. Our job," he said slowly, "is to protect people, not to make them feel uncomfortable for no reason. Every citizen deserves respect, no matter where they are or what they look like." Amaya felt warmth rise in her chest. She had never expected the chief to handle things so directly. She had never expected anyone in authority to defend her so clearly. In that moment, she felt less alone. The chief then looked around at the small crowd that had formed. People standing by their cars, pretending not to stare but still listening closely. This situation wasn't just between Maya and the officer anymore. It had become something larger. A moment of truth happening in front of many eyes. "Ma'am," the chief said gently toward Maya, "would you like to step aside for a moment? I want to speak with both of you, but I'd like to start by making sure you feel comfortable." Maya nodded. "Yes, thank you." They walked a few steps away from the pump. The chief stood beside her, and the officer stood slightly behind, looking pale. The gas station lights reflected on the concrete, making the scene feel almost like a stage. The chief continued speaking in a steady tone. "You have every right to fuel your car without being questioned like this," he said to Maya. "You did nothing wrong." Those words hit Maya harder than she expected. All day she had been tired, stressed, and now embarrassed. Hearing someone say she was right, truly right, felt like a weight lifting off her shoulders. She nodded again. "I just wanted to go home," she said softly. "I understand," the chief replied, "and you will. But first I need to make sure this situation is handled properly." He looked toward the officer again, "And that includes accountability." The officer lowered his head. He wasn't angry. He wasn't defensive anymore. He simply looked ashamed. Maya noticed that, and even though she didn't excuse his behavior, she felt a small shift in her heart. She didn't want revenge. She only wanted clarity and fairness. The chief took a slow breath before speaking again. "This kind of moment is important," he said. "How we respond shows who we really are, not just as officers, but as people." His words were calm, simple, and honest. For one long moment, the three of them stood there, Maya with quiet strength, the officer with regret, and the chief with a firm but gentle presence. And all around them, the evening felt different now. The tension had faded. The fear had weakened. Something new had taken its place. Something honest, something human. Maya didn't know what would happen next, but for the first time since the lights flashed behind her car, she felt hope. The chief stood silently for a moment after speaking, letting the situation settle. The officer shifted uncomfortably, his eyes moving between the ground and the chief's face. Maya stood still, her hands folded in front of her, trying to look calm even though her heart was still beating fast. The chief finally broke the silence. "Officer, walk with me," he said softly. The tone wasn't angry, it was controlled, serious, and clear. The officer nodded and followed him a few steps away, still within Maya's view. She didn't want to move too far from her car, but she also didn't want to miss what might happen. So she stood quietly, leaning slightly against her vehicle, watching with careful eyes. The chief turned to the officer. "Tell me exactly why you approached her," he said. "No guessing, no extra explanations, just the truth." The officer swallowed. His voice came out low. "Chief, I honestly thought she looked suspicious." "How?" the chief asked. "Explain what you saw." The officer hesitated. His eyes darted around as if searching for a better answer. But there wasn't one. She arrived quickly and I didn't recognize her car. I thought maybe something wasn't right. The chief raised an eyebrow gently. "You stopped someone because you didn't recognize their car at a public gas station." The officer looked down. "I understand how it sounds."
"Yes,"
the chief replied softly, and that's how she experienced it. Maya watched their conversation, feeling a small knot tighten in her chest. She didn't want the officer to lose his job. She only wanted him to understand how his actions had affected her. The chief continued, "Did she break any rule? Drive dangerously? Act in a worrying way?" "No, sir," the officer admitted. "Then why question her like that?" The officer took a long breath. I made a mistake. I assumed something was wrong without real evidence. The chief nodded slowly. Assumptions can harm good people, and they damage trust. He wasn't shouting. He wasn't angry, but his words felt heavier than raised voices. His calm tone carried real weight. Maya watched the officer's posture shrink. He didn't look defensive anymore. He looked like someone finally realizing the impact of his choices. The chief turned and called Maya over with a small wave of his hand. "Mom, would you please join us?" Maya walked toward them, her steps slow but steady. She felt nervous, but she also felt stronger than before. The chief faced her with gentle eyes. "Mom, the officer has something to tell you." The officer looked up at her, and for the first time since he arrived, his expression wasn't strict. It was unsure, almost apologetic. "Mom," he began, I didn't handle things the right way. I misjudged the situation. You did nothing wrong. I'm sorry for making you feel uncomfortable." Maya didn't speak right away. She wanted to choose her words carefully. She looked at the officer, then at the chief, and said softly, "I accept your apology, but please understand moments like this stay with people. It makes everyday life feel harder." The officer nodded. "I know. I'll do better." The chief watched the exchange carefully, then added, "Thank you, ma'am. Your patience helped keep this situation calm." Not everyone could stay as composed. Maya appreciated that. She had not felt calm, but she had tried her best. Hearing the chief say it out loud made her feel seen. The chief then made a gentle gesture toward the officer. "We all learn," he said, "but learning starts with honesty." The conversation might have ended there, but something in Maya's heart felt heavy. Something she needed to say. "Sir," she said to the chief, "can I explain something?" "Of course," he replied. Maya took a quiet breath. "When I see flashing lights behind me, even when I've done nothing wrong, I feel scared. Not because of who you are as officers, but because I don't know how the situation will go. I just wanted to buy fuel. I just wanted to get home. But I felt judged before I even said a word." The chief listened with a serious expression, nodding occasionally. The officer looked down again, clearly uncomfortable, but not because he felt attacked, because he understood Maya. The chief said gently, using her name for the first time, "Thank you for sharing that. Your honesty matters. Your experience matters. I will take this seriously." The officer whispered, "It won't happen again." Maya gave a small nod. "I'm not angry, just tired, and I want things to be better for everyone." The chief looked at her with respect. "And they will be," he promised. But change starts with moments like this. Around them, the gas station had gone almost silent. Engines hummed softly in the background, but no one interrupted. Everyone could sense that something meaningful was happening. The chief then spoke again, this time to both of them. "Let's finish this the right way, with understanding, fairness, and respect." Maya felt her heart settle. The officer felt humbled, and the chief stood as a reminder that leadership wasn't about power. It was about guiding people toward better choices. In that quiet corner of a simple gas station, something important had shifted. Understanding had taken the place of suspicion. Respect had replaced fear, and truth had taken the center of the story. Maya stood quietly after sharing her feelings, and for a moment the space between the three of them felt calm, almost peaceful. The tension that had filled the air earlier was slowly disappearing. The officer's shoulders were no longer stiff. Instead, they seemed to slope with understanding. The chief's expression had softened too, not because the situation was small, but because honesty had opened a path toward healing. The chief took a slow breath and spoke gently. "Mom, thank you again for explaining your experience with such patience. I want you to know that your voice matters here. And now there is one more step we need to take." He turned toward the officer. "Officer, an apology is important, but understanding why it matters is even more important." The officer nodded slowly. "Yes, Chief, I understand." The chief looked at him directly, his expression calm but meaningful. "Please offer a proper apology, not just words, but true understanding." The officer stepped forward slightly, keeping his hands in front of him. He looked at Maya with clear regret. "Ma'am," he said softly, "I am truly sorry. My actions were not fair. I made you feel uncomfortable during a simple, normal moment in your day. You didn't deserve that. I should have treated you with respect and kindness from the beginning. I promise I will learn from this and do better." His voice trembled a little, but not from fear, from sincerity. Maya studied his face. She could see he wasn't just repeating words because the chief told him to. He looked genuinely sorry, and that mattered to her. She believed in giving people a chance to improve, especially when they were willing to admit their mistakes. "I accept your apology," she said softly. "Thank you for saying it clearly. I just hope you remember how moments like this affect people. Sometimes one small action can leave someone feeling unsafe all day." "I will remember," the officer replied. The chief nodded approvingly. "Good." Apology accepted and responsibility acknowledged. A small breeze moved through the gas station, rustling the paper signs on the pumps. Cars continued to pass along the road, but inside this little circle of pavement, it felt like time had slowed down. Something meaningful was happening, something rare. The chief turned to Maya again. Ma'am, please know that this will not be ignored. There will be a formal review. Training will follow. This is not a punishment meant to harm anyone. It is meant to improve our community and ensure every person feels safe. Maya nodded. She didn't want anyone to suffer, but she wanted change. Real change only happens when people in authority take things seriously. I appreciate that, she replied. It means a lot to hear you say it. The chief gave a small smile, not a big one, but one that showed warmth. Your calm response helped make this moment constructive. Not everyone can stay steady under stress. I want you to know you handled yourself with great strength. Maya lowered her eyes shyly. She wasn't used to compliments from strangers, especially during stressful moments. But she appreciated it. Deep down, she had been shaking even if she didn't show it. Hearing the chief acknowledge her strength made her feel understood. The officer spoke again, quietly. I am grateful for how calm you stayed too. It helped me realize my mistake. Maya didn't answer right away. She simply nodded. She could tell he meant it. She hoped he would carry this moment with him for the rest of his career. The chief then stepped back slightly, creating a more comfortable space between them. Mom, is there anything else you want to share? Any concern or detail you feel should be addressed? Maya thought for a moment. Just one thing, she said. I want people to feel safe doing normal things, like buying fuel, going to work, or walking in their neighborhoods. I hope officers remember how their tone and actions can affect someone's entire day. The chief nodded thoughtfully. You are absolutely right. He glanced at the officer. That is why today's moment matters. The officer nodded as well, accepting the lesson. A silence followed. But it was a peaceful silence, not tense like before. It felt like a moment of understanding, where everyone finally stood on the same ground. The chief cleared his throat softly. All right. Thank you both for your honesty. We will handle this properly from here. But for now, I want you, he looked at Maya, to continue your evening without worry. Maya smiled faintly, feeling lighter now. Thank you, Chief. I really appreciate your support. The chief opened the door of his SUV and paused before getting inside. If you ever feel uncomfortable in the future, or if something happens, please reach out. You deserve to feel safe in this community. I will, Maya replied. The officer stepped back, giving her space. Have a peaceful evening.
Ma'am, you too,
she said. As the chief's SUV engine started, Maya suddenly realized the shaking in her hands had stopped. The fear that had filled her chest earlier had faded. She felt steady again, grounded. She walked back to her car and gently closed the door. For the first time all evening, she let out a long, relieved breath. This moment, as stressful as it was, had turned into something meaningful. Something that might not only change one officer, but maybe even help shape better understanding in the future. Maya sat inside her car for a moment, letting her breath settle. Her hands were slowly returning to normal. The shaking was gone, but the memory of the moment still rested heavily inside her. She placed both hands on the steering wheel and closed her eyes, giving herself a short pause before starting the engine. Just as she reached for her keys, she heard a soft tap on her window. She looked up and saw the chief standing there, his expression gentle. He wasn't rushing her. He wasn't issuing orders. He was simply checking in. Maya rolled the window down halfway. Yes, sir, she asked softly. Would you mind if we talked for a moment? He asked. Only if you feel comfortable. Maya nodded. She appreciated that he asked instead of assuming. She opened her car door and stepped out again. The sky had grown darker, and the streetlights shone a warm yellow across the parking lot. Everything felt calmer now, and the chief's presence only added to that calm. They walked a few steps away from the pumps, standing in a quieter corner of the lot. Cars came and went behind them, but their small corner felt peaceful, reflective. The chief began gently. I want to thank you for how you handled yourself today. You stayed calm in a situation that was confusing and stressful. That takes strength. Maya shook her head modestly. I didn't feel strong, she said. I was scared. I was tired. I didn't know what would happen. Even then, the chief replied. You stayed respectful and steady. Not everyone can do that. Maya appreciated his words, but she felt something deeper she needed to express. Sir, can I be honest, please? He said. I'm here to listen. Maya breathed in slowly. Sometimes it feels like everyday life becomes harder for no reason. I work, I follow rules, I try to be kind, but moments like today remind me that even simple tasks can turn into something stressful. The chief nodded. His face held real understanding, not just polite sympathy. You're right, he said softly. And I won't pretend I fully understand your experience. But I do know this, moments like today are exactly why we teach officers to communicate clearly and fairly. Maya looked toward the road, watching a car pull away. I don't want trouble for anyone, she said. I just want people to feel safe while doing normal things. That, the chief said gently, is exactly what we want too. He leaned slightly against the railing behind them, crossing his arms calmly, not in a defensive way but in a thoughtful one. People trust us with a big responsibility, he continued. And that trust is earned, not given. If an officer forgets that, even for a moment, it can affect someone's entire day or even their view of the whole system. Amaya nodded slowly. She had never heard someone in authority speak so openly. It felt reassuring, like a gentle reminder that change was possible. The chief continued, I want to make something clear. What happened today will lead to action. Not punishment meant to harm, but training meant to improve. We can't grow as a department unless we learn from real situations. You helped us learn today. Maya looked surprised. Mem, yes, the chief said, because you spoke honestly. You explained how you felt. That gives us something real to work with, not just reports but understanding. Maya smiled slightly, feeling a sense of pride mixed with relief. I'm glad if something good can come out of tonight. The chief nodded. It already has. For a moment, they both stood quietly. The wind moved gently through the trees, and the warm glow of the streetlights made the parking lot feel softer, safer. After a long silence, Maya spoke again. May I ask something? Of course. Do you think he really understood? The officer, I mean. The chief took a moment before answering. Yes, I believe he did. Sometimes people don't see their own mistakes until they're shown clearly. And today he saw he felt regret. That's the first step to becoming better. Maya nodded thoughtfully. I hope he changes. Not just for me, but for anyone he meets. He will, the chief said firmly. And I'll make sure of it. The reassurance in his voice made Maya feel lighter. She didn't need promises of perfection. She only needed to know someone cared enough to make things better. After another pause, the chief gave her a warm yet respectful smile. You should head home soon. You've had a long day, and you deserve peace tonight. Maya smiled back. Thank you, Chief. Truly, I didn't expect anyone to stand up for me. Well, he replied softly, sometimes the right person appears at the right moment. They shook hands gently, no big speeches, no dramatic exit, just a quiet moment of understanding between two people who wanted fairness in the world. As Maya walked back to her car, she felt lighter than she had all evening. She opened the door, sat down, and took one last look at the chief. He gave a small nod, a silent sign of respect. And for the first time that night, Maya felt safe again. The next morning, sunlight filled the police station lobby as officers arrived for their shifts. Some carried coffee, some chatted quietly, but one officer walked in with a slower step than usual. It was the same officer from the gas station. His face showed worry, not anger. The kind of worry that comes after a long night of thinking. He had barely slept. The memory of Maya's calm voice, her honesty, and the chief's disappointed expression kept replaying in his mind. He realized how differently the situation could have gone, and how much stress he had caused someone who had done nothing wrong. At exactly 9 o'clock, he was called into the chief's office. The chief sat behind his desk, not looking upset, but serious. A file sat open in front of him, along with notes from the previous night. The officer stood in front of the desk, hands behind his back, waiting. Sit down, the chief said calmly. The officer obeyed. For a moment, the chief didn't speak. He just studied the man in front of him, trying to read whether he understood the weight of what had happened. Finally, he said, Tell me what you learned last night. The officer took a breath. Chief, I learned that my actions affect people more than I sometimes realize. I acted on assumptions. I made someone feel uncomfortable when she did nothing wrong, and I regret it. The chief nodded slowly. Good. That is the truth. But understanding must lead to improvement. I'm ready to improve, the officer replied. The chief opened the file, glanced at a page, and then closed it again. When you approach someone, you represent this entire department. Your tone, your body language, your questions, they all matter. People look to us for safety, not pressure. The officer lowered his eyes. I understand now. I didn't see the situation clearly. You saw it through worry, not evidence. The chief corrected gently. Worry is not a reason to question someone without cause. The room fell quiet for a moment. Outside the office door, phones rang and printers hummed, but inside the office everything felt still. The chief continued. I spoke to Maya after the incident. She didn't want revenge. She didn't want you punished harshly. She only wanted fairness. And she asked for one thing, that you learn. The officer's eyes softened. She was patient with me. More patient than I deserved. Yes, the chief agreed. And that patience gave you a chance to change. He leaned forward slightly. I'm assigning you to additional training. Communication training, community understanding training, and ride-alongs with our senior officers. I want you to learn how to approach people with respect first, questions second. The officer nodded without hesitation. I accept that. The chief wasn't done. I also want you to write a reflection report, not for discipline, but for growth. I want you to explain what happened, what you felt, what you saw, and what you wish you had done differently. The officer understood. I will write it, sir. The chief paused, then asked, Do you know why I am not giving you a strict punishment? The officer looked surprised. No, sir, because I saw something in your face last night, the chief explained. I saw regret, real regret, and regret can be the start of meaningful change. The officer swallowed, touched by the chief's trust. "Thank you for giving me another chance." "This is not just a chance," the chief said. "It is a responsibility." The officer nodded again. The chief stood up, signaling the meeting was almost over. "Before you go," he said, "remember this. Every person you meet is living their own life, fighting their own challenges, carrying their own fears. Treat them as human first." "Yes, Chief." "Good," the chief said quietly. "Now go learn from this." The officer stood, saluted respectfully, and walked out. But he didn't go straight to his desk. Instead, he walked outside behind the station, where there was a small bench under a tree. He sat down and took a deep breath. He thought about how Maya had spoken, not with anger, but with honesty. He thought about how she had accepted his apology, even though she had every right to walk away frustrated. That kind of grace stayed with him. It pushed him to want to do better. He pulled out his small notebook and wrote the first line of his reflection report. "I want to understand people better." Inside the station, the chief watched him through the window. He could see the officer writing, thinking, trying, and that gave him hope. The chief believed change didn't happen through punishment alone. It happened through awareness, empathy, and responsibility. Back at the gas station, Maya had no idea these conversations were happening. She was at work, making copies, checking emails, smiling politely at coworkers. She was trying to move forward with her day. But something would soon show her that last night had not been ignored, something she would appreciate deeply. For now, though, she simply carried a quiet sense of peace, knowing that telling her truth had made a difference. A lesson had been learned, and a new understanding had begun to grow. A week passed quietly after the incident at the gas station. Life returned to normal for Maya, or at least, as normal as it could be after such a stressful night. She went to work, attended meetings, answered emails, and tried hard to push the memory away. But every time she passed a police car, a small part of her chest tightened. She wondered if she would ever fully forget that moment of fear. One evening after work, her car's fuel light blinked again. She sighed gently. Of all places, she had to return to that same gas station. She sat in her car for a few seconds, debating whether to go to a different station. But then she reminded herself, "I didn't do anything wrong. I should not have to avoid a normal place because of one bad moment." So she pulled in. The same bright lights, the same pumps, the same little store at the corner. But tonight, something felt different. Her heart didn't race this time. Instead, she felt calm, maybe because she knew the truth had been spoken and heard. She stepped out of her car, filled her tank, and looked around. No flashing lights, no harsh voices, just a regular peaceful evening. As she finished fueling, she noticed a patrol car slowly pulling into the lot. For a second, her breath caught. But then she saw the driver. It wasn't the same officer. It was an older officer she had seen around town before, someone known for being kind. He parked at the far end of the lot, stepped out, and gave her a polite nod. No questions, no assumptions, just a simple human gesture. And to her surprise, that little nod made her heart feel lighter. Maya got back into her car and sat for a moment. She realized something important. She felt safe, not because the world was perfect, but because change had started, even in a small way. Meanwhile, at the police station, the chief sat in his office reading a handwritten report. It was the reflection written by the officer involved in the incident. The first line caught his attention. "I want to understand people better." The chief continued reading. The officer wrote about his mistake, about how he realized assumptions can hurt people, and how Maya's calm honesty taught him something he had never learned in training. He wrote about wanting to build trust, not fear. About wanting to see people, not just situations. When the chief finished reading, he closed the notebook and leaned back in his chair. A small smile formed on his face. Change was not always loud. Sometimes it was quiet, like a seed growing underground. But it was still change. He decided he would speak with the officer again tomorrow. Not to correct him this time, but to encourage him. Growth deserved recognition. Later that same week, Maya received a letter in the mail. At first, she didn't recognize the sender. When she opened it, she saw it was from the police department. Her stomach tightened, unsure of what it would say. Inside was a short, respectful note. "Thank you for your patience and honesty during last week's incident. Your voice helped us improve our service and understanding. Our goal is fairness for every citizen, and your courage contributed to that goal. Chief of Police." Maya read the letter twice. She felt warmth rise in her chest. Not because she wanted attention, she didn't, but because someone had taken the time to acknowledge her. To say that what happened mattered. To say she mattered. She placed the letter gently on her table and smiled. A difficult moment had turned into something meaningful. Not perfect, not magical, but real. A step toward understanding, a step toward better actions in the future. One evening, Maya met her friend Leah for dinner. Lee had heard about the incident and asked gently, "Were you okay now? Did everything work out?" Maya nodded with a small smile. "It did. I was scared that night, but something good came out of it." "What do you mean?" Lee asked. Maya thought carefully. Someone listened. Someone cared. And someone learned. "I didn't expect that. Ali reached across the table and squeezed her hand. You handled it with so much grace. I'm proud of you. Maya felt a warm sense of peace settle into her. She didn't see herself as a hero or a fighter. She was just a person who wanted fairness and respect. But sometimes, even ordinary people become part of important moments without trying. As the days turned into weeks, Maya found herself thinking less about the fear and more about the growth. She realized that sometimes life gives us surprising moments, not to break us, but to teach us, and sometimes even to teach others. She didn't know if she had changed the officer's life forever. She didn't know if her story would reach others, but she knew she had spoken her truth, stayed calm, and helped someone see a better way, and that was enough. Months later, when she drove past the gas station again, she smiled softly, not because the place had changed, but because she had. In the end, her story became more than a moment of fear. It became a quiet message, a reminder that kindness, respect, and understanding can begin even in the most unexpected places. Sometimes all it takes is one honest voice, one person willing to listen, one moment that leads to learning, and one simple truth: everyone deserves to feel safe.